Hello, thank you for being here. My name is Megan Searing-Young, and I'm the director of the Greenbelt Museum. We really appreciate your interest in the program tonight. For those of you who are new to our programs, we're a museum in Greenbelt, Maryland, which is one of three experimental green towns built in 1937 as part of the New Deal. Sadly, despite the fact that it was built by both Black and white workers, Black families were excluded completely and it was open to white families only. But you'll hear more about that during tonight's talk. The museum is a public-private partnership. The City of Greenbelt owns and operates the museum, and the Friends of the Greenbelt Museum, a nonprofit, spearheads fundraising to support the work that we do here. The museum house is open on Sundays from 1 to 5 with tours on the half hour. Currently on display is an exhibit all about the U.S. bicentennial in 1976 and takes a look at what patriotism looked like then. We also offer walking tours, this lecture series, special events throughout the year, and much more. We have some great programs coming up, including our Retro Town Fair over Labor Day weekend. And if you haven't already, we encourage you to sign up for our email newsletter. We only send about 1 to 2 messages per month on average, and it's a great way to stay in touch with what the museum's up to, and also our expansion to 10A Crescent, the building next door to the museum house. For more information about what we do or to get involved, please visit our website at greenbeltmuseum.org. I'd also like to thank the Greenbelt Reparations Commission for co-sponsoring this event. And to learn more about the commission, please visit greenbeltreparations.info. As we get the talk underway, please keep your microphones muted and save any questions you have, put them in the chat, and we will have time at the end for us to ask the questions of our speakers. Thank you for accommodating that. So turning to tonight, we're so pleased to welcome our speakers, Dr. Lois Rosado, who's currently serving as the chair of the Reparations Commission. She retired after 20 years as Dean/Executive Director of the State University of New York, Brooklyn Educational Opportunity Center. This was an academic and workforce development program for adult students. She has a doctoral degree from Teachers College, Columbia University, and a postdoctorate certificate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She was also an associate professor of education at the City University of New York. Dr. Rosado has received numerous awards for her innovative programs for adult learners and has long advocated for more educational resources for underserved communities and populations. She was a student leader in college, a foot soldier in the civil rights movement, and participated in environmental justice demonstrations in New York. Dr. Rosado moved to Greenbelt in 2009, and in addition to numerous volunteer roles in city organizations, helped to establish the Greenbelt Black History and Culture Committee in 2018. In 2022, she was appointed to the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. We also have with us Dr. Denise Nadson, another member of the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. She's lived in Greenbelt since 2008. She retired again in 2024 from higher education, where she served as a data analytics researcher. She continues to teach and to consult. Her family migrated from South Africa in the early 1970s, where her father was actively involved with the anti-apartheid movement. She brings to the Greenbelt Reparations Commission a strong belief that people with different backgrounds can come together to create change in support of racial justice. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being here. I am Dr. Lois Rosado, and Denise and I have split up the presentation, and I will sort of give you the first part and talk about some of the things and background we've done, and then Denise will take over the historical sections. To begin with, on November 21st, let's give the background of the Reparations Commission. On the people of Greenbelt, the citizens of Greenbelt, voted and passed a referendum to create a 21-member Reparations Commission related to seeking research for African Americans and Native American residents of Greenbelt. The city in 23 actually, appointed a diversified group of residents from all parts of Greenbelt. We have met monthly since 2023. The work has been really demanding, but it requires commitment, collaboration, and self-care. We have made tremendous progress, and for those of you that attended our town halls, we've tried to keep you abreast of that progress. Next slide. Research local history, identify policies and practices of the local, state, and federal government that contributed to systemic discrimination against African American and Native American residents of Greenbelt. We have to determine if those policies and practices continue to cause harm, determine how those harms impact present-day populations, and our primary goal also is to educate the community and the public about those, and engage residents to participate and learn during our town halls and focus groups. We expect we will develop a succinct set of recommendations for the City Council to begin healing and repair. Next slide. Why this work has been important. There has to be an acknowledgement of the through line from enslavement to the present, and that usually takes place through studying reparations and learn how past and current harms impact us today. This knowledge enables us to repair damage by ensuring that our policies provide social and economic equity. With this acknowledgement, we can build community upon truth and promote a more cohesive and inclusive society. We hope to achieve community healing at the end of this process. Defining reparations. The Commission did a lot of research to be able to tailor our definition of reparations to meet Greenbelt and our needs. So the reparations is a process of repairing and healing from harms that have been inflicted upon African Americans and American Indians by government, for example, segregation, housing policy, stolen land, displacement, genocide, laws, policies, and practices of sectors that benefited from the injustices, such as banks, Citibank, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Corporation, Lehman Brothers, Aetna, Barclays, insurers, New York Life, educational institutions from the University of Maryland to the University of Virginia, including Brown, Princeton, Yale, and Harvard, and of course, Georgetown. Health systems. We go from the experiments that were done by J. Marion Sims, considered the father of gynecology, who experimented on enslaved African women without using anesthesia. And today, that results in many doctors seemingly believe that African American women don't experience hurt and pain the way other people do. We do experience hate. The Tuskegee experiments on Black men with syphilis, sterilization, for example, what happened to Fannie Lou Hamer, and religious groups. The slave Bible, that was the Bible designed for enslaved people to make them believe that this was their lot in life. The segregated churches, the Society of Jesus, the Church of England, the Methodists. I think we have to realize how this definition pushes for a process. So as we continue our presentation, just think about a process of repairing and healing harms. Next slide. One of the first things we did is to recruit Dr. Nkechi Tayefa, a national leader on reparations. In fact, she's been working on reparations for 69 years. So she presented a history of the reparations movement to the commissioners, because most of us, we knew some things and many of us didn't know anything. We researched reparations activities across the country. There were 78 initiatives. We attended the first Repair Reparations Symposium in Evanston, Illinois, and another of other conferences that enabled us to participate in a variety of educational activities. In order for you to gain a good understanding of reparations as a whole, we have a short slide that was made by Dr. Nkiti that we'll play for you now.
Okay. The wealth the U.S. enjoys today was built on the backs of the stolen lives and labor of millions of enslaved and formerly enslaved Black people. After emancipation, there was no real freedom, as Blacks were denied land, subjected to Jim Crow segregation laws, stripped of the right to vote, medically experimented on, relegated to substandard housing, redlined, blocked from GI military benefits, and more. The abuse and trauma continues today, with negative impacts on wealth, inequalities in education, disparities in health, unfairness in the system of punishment, and more. Legacies from the enslavement era remain in today's economy, still generating wealth. Financial companies were enriched, life insurance policies were sold on the lives of enslaved persons, and newspaper publishers inflamed white terrorism. Reparations is not a pie-in-the-sky concept or a strange, extreme idea. Reparations is a well-established principle in both U.S. and international law for those who have suffered gross human rights abuses. However, there have been missed opportunities to provide repair and amends to Black people. Reparations were paid when chattel slavery was abolished in the nation's capital in 1862, but the reparations were not paid to the newly freed Black people. The reparations went to their former white enslavers. Similarly, the British government paid reparations when it abolished slavery in 1833, again, not to its formerly enslaved, but to the former white enslavers. And those reparation payments continued for centuries after both the enslaved and enslavers were dead, all the way up through 2015. At the end of the Civil War, newly freed Black leaders helped develop Special Field Order 15, where Black families were able to claim up to 40 acres of land. However, the reparations provision was stripped before it could become actualized, and the empty promise of 40 acres and a mule has echoed ever since. But Black people have never stopped advocating for reparations. Beginning in 1783, Belinda, kidnapped from Africa at age 12 and enslaved by the wealthy royal family in Boston for 50 years, submitted court petitions for payment for her enslavement and was granted 15 pounds per year. In 1870, Henrietta Wood petitioned a court for and was granted $2,500 for the years stolen from her life. To date, that sum, although a pittance, is the largest on record to be granted by a U.S. court for enslavement. In 1898, Callie House helped spearhead the first mass-based reparations movement in the United States, whose mission was to organize mutual aid and pass federal pension legislation to compensate formerly enslaved persons. She was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for her organizing. A follower of the early 20th century Marcus Garvey movement, later to be known as Queen Mother Audley Moore, championed the cause of reparations throughout the century, inspiring leaders in both the civil rights and Black Power movements. These movements inspired Japanese Americans, resulting in the 1988 passage of the Civil Liberties Act, which granted them reparations for unjust incarceration during World War II. Spurred by Black reparation activists, Congressman John Conyers introduced H.R. 40 in 1989 to establish a federal commission to examine slavery and discrimination and recommend remedies. After the 2020 George Floyd murder, millions protested for Black lives, and a multitude of organizations dedicated to reparations emerged. Cities nationwide began establishing reparation commissions and task forces, and California established the first statewide reparations task force. Academic and religious institutions began publicly supporting reparations. Traumatic massacres in Rosewood, Tulsa, Elaine, Wilmington, and more were publicized, along with revelations that Georgetown University stands because of the enslaved peoples that were sold to keep the school financially stable. But some people don't believe that people alive today should have to pay for something they personally were not responsible for. We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. Although today's whites may be innocent of past harms, many stand in privileged positions because of the past and benefit from a society immersed in white supremacy. There is no statute of limitations on addressing human rights violations. Some people feel that reparations is only about the money. Reparations is more than the cutting of a check. A reparations settlement can be fashioned in as many ways as necessary to equitably address the countless manifestations of injury sustained from chattel slavery and its continuing vestiges. It's a new day with new energy and new possibilities. Reparations can be a vehicle for transformative change. Indeed, reparations may be the only policy that comprehensively addresses the very crux of racism and inequity, the harms from the enslavement era that still manifest today in nearly every aspect of life. The fruit we see now emanated from historic seeds that were planted and watered for generations. Reparations are no longer a stretch of the imagination or an unobtainable goal, but very likely a reality and achievable in our lifetime.
Next line. I think Dr. Taifa has given you an overview, provided you with an overview about reparations, why the demand is being made, and that it has not stopped being made, and it started early. But she's also made it clear that reparations should not be seen as something in the abstract, but it is doable, and it has been done, and it should HR 40 should be passed in Congress. For the Reparations Commission, what we've had to do is do the research on Greenbelt. We've had to gather historic and current demographic data. We've conducted historical research on harmed communities, and we've interviewed a number of representatives from the harmed communities, African American as well as Indigenous people. Not all the Indigenous people, unfortunately, resided in Greenbelt, because as right now we've identified one Indigenous person in Greenbelt who self-identified just before our last town hall. We hired the African American Redress Network from Columbia University and students from the Howard University Lawyering Clinic, the Piscataway Indian Nation, to research harms and explore recommendations. And this also included students from the University of Maryland to explore demographics. We have also identified harms, and some of you who attended the several of our town halls have been privy to those presentations.
Thanks, Lois, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got a group of volunteers, but many of us have been doing a lot of research to address reparations. And so I'm going to share a little bit about the history and how that has evolved. So obviously the city was started the building in 1935 by the federal government. It wasn't completed until 1937, but African Americans did help build the community. And as Megan mentioned earlier, they were not allowed to live in Greenbelt. There was a development called Rossville that was just north of Greenbelt, which was supposed to provide segregated housing for African Americans, but Rossville was never built. In 1953, a Greenbelt cooperative purchased the homes that were in Greenbelt, what is now known as GHI, from the federal government. But at that time, all the residents were white. In 1966 was when the first African-American family moved into the Greenbelt Cooperative. And around that time, around 1968, is when the Fair Housing Act was passed. So as Greenbelt began to evolve after that, it was really slow to integrate. As Greenbelt became more diverse, African Americans moved into Greenbelt East and Greenbelt West, while the center Greenbelt area stayed mostly white. In 2008, the population of Greenbelt was about 40% white, but the council was 100% white. Around that time, the NAACP threatened a lawsuit. And in 2009, the community, the city, elected the first African American to the council. This was Emmett Jordan, who became mayor actually in 2019. So this was Greenbelt's first African American mayor. So I have a question for you all who are listening. Fun fact, does anyone know when the first African American mayor was elected to any city or town in the US? If you do, you can drop it in the chat or unmute, whatever you like. I'm just going to give you a couple seconds to drop your guess in there. Anybody can guess? No takers. Okay, I'm just going to give you the answer. How's that? It was in 1868. So, sorry? Somebody had an answer?
What?
She said 1868, the first mayor.
Yeah, 1868. Pierre Caliste Landry was elected as the first Black mayor in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Since then, there were several other cities that had elected their first Black mayor. By 1966, there were 25 cities that had elected their first Black mayor. I share this only to let you know that as progressive as we are, Greenbelt is slow to integrate. In 2025, the population was about 21% white and 45% Black. So the majority of our population is African American. But today we do have a more diverse city council. So in summary, and I'm going to go into some of this in a little bit more detail, but 12,000 years, maybe longer, Indigenous people have lived on this land. Sometime in the 1600s, the Europeans came in and displaced or killed many of them. A few years ago, several tribes from Maryland and surrounding areas identified common priorities for restitution and repatriation, and that was shared with the state of Maryland. And that's public information. Since the Native American communities were forced off the land, the legacy of slavery then took hold and saturated this land that is now called Greenbelt. And that sense of slavery, the legacy of slavery, has persisted long after abolition, long after slavery has ended. Greenbelt was considered a sundown town, and for some people that means that there was clear notice that Blacks are not to live there, but for other people it meant Blacks are not allowed to be seen in the town after the sun goes down. And that was what was experienced by many African Americans. So African Americans did live here, but they were not allowed to live here until after 1965. So this is just a summary of what we've learned, and these are identifying some of the harms from our past. So our community today stands for cultural respect, attentive dialogue, and mutual trust. This is the foundation that we need to repair and heal from the past harms. So let's look at some of the context and the harms for the indigenous people a bit more. So back in the day, there was no state boundaries, so the land was the land, and people used the land as they needed. But today, indigenous people have to be recognized by the current government in order to be seen or heard. There are 3 tribes recognized by the state of Maryland: Accohonic Indian Tribe, Piscataway Indian Nation, and the Piscataway Conoy Tribe of Maryland, which actually includes a lot of several tribal groups. There are other tribes that are recognized by the federal government. Unfortunately, if you are recognized by the federal government, you may be entitled to federal benefits, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be heard, honored, or respected. So there are some harms that indigenous people have experienced, and this includes losing their land and sacred sites. And there is a sacred site that is located in Greenbelt. They've experienced challenges practicing their native religion. This is not the traditional religious structures that we might be used to. They have experienced the loss of sacred objects, and particularly their ancestral remains. So the land that we live on contains ancestral remains. That's their burial site. And what happens if an individual digs up their ancestors' remains? What do we do? That's unclear. They've also experienced residential employment discrimination and exclusion. Excuse me. So there are some potential remedies that have been identified for Native American people. The repatriation of their ancestral remains and sacred objects, the restoration of land so that they can have community gatherings. Their community gatherings isn't 15 or 20 people, it's hundreds of people, and they need space for that. Protection of sacred sites, and this includes the one in Greenbelt. The establishment of indigenous cultural, educational, and health centers to support their unique culture. Assistance to improve the economic development within the Native community, because they do still want to be a community within themselves. A formal apology and a land acknowledgement from the city, and this is something that they've expressed they'd like to have, but they'd like to work with us to make that land acknowledgement meaningful. So this is just a summary, and much of this was discovered through our research, our reports, interviews, as well as some documents that were available, and of course the Piscataway Indian Nation collaborated with us on some of this. So some of the educational challenges experienced by the Native American people really kind of speak to the erasure of the Native American people in our educational system. For example, 87% of state history standards do not mention Native American history after 1900. 27 states don't even mention a single Native American in their K through 12 curriculum. There's an incredibly powerful documentary about indigenous people being forced into boarding schools to assimilate and erase their history. It's called Sugarcane. It was played at the Greenbelt Cinema not too long ago, but it's a pretty powerful video. I'd recommend it. So now we're going to pivot to look at what we've learned about the African American experiences from our research, interviews, focus groups, surveys, etc. The vestiges of enslavement, Jim Crow laws, and the racialized economic disparity is one of the key harms that continues to be experienced by African Americans. African American residents are considered less wealthy than white residents. I don't think that is really a surprise, but we do have data to support that, and I'll share that with you. Through our surveys, we learned that some African American residents do feel marginalized and excluded from decision-making, and some have experienced less access to services and amenities. And many have concerns about equitable support provided throughout the city. So this is sort of a summary of the wealth disparities that we've uncovered. We've looked at data both locally and nationally. So when we look at wealth, we also have to look at the economy. Slavery was the foundation of the economy for Maryland and Prince George's County, and white communities became rich because of slavery. But even after slavery ended, the criminal justice system contributed to the wealth of the white communities. There are several documentaries about this, but I recommend one that PBS has done called Slavery by Another Name. That's based on a book by Douglas Blackman. And it talks about how African Americans were arrested specifically to support the economy and provide low-cost labor through the criminal justice system. These systemic racial institutions help make the white community wealthier and keep African Americans in poverty. On average, white households have 10 times the median wealth of African American households, and that's according to the Census Bureau. One of the key facts to wealth is housing. Even after the Fair Housing Act was passed and after African Americans were allowed to move into Greenbelt, they still experience numerous barriers to home ownership, potentially pushing them into rental communities in the city. The most important part of this research, though, is that there are historians and economists who trace the present-day wealth gap to the injustices of the race-based chattel slavery and subsequent race-based discrimination. Okay, we're going to look at poverty rates now, and poverty rates is the percentage of people who live below the poverty line. And right now, that's about $16,000 for an individual and $33,000 for a family of 4. So in the state of Maryland, it's 10%. So 10% of the population lives below the poverty line. In Prince George's County, it's 11. In Greenbelt, as a whole, it's 19%. However, in one section of Greenbelt, it's 27%. So much of this data comes from the Census Bureau, and we can't reliably define Greenbelt East, West, and Center because of the way Census breaks it up. But we have found that parts of Greenbelt West have a high poverty rate. More dramatically, however, we found that the child poverty rates in some parts of Greenbelt can be over 40%. That means 40% of the children in some parts of Greenbelt live in poverty where the total family income is below $33,000. Okay, so now we're going to look at the demographics of the population by race. This is also based on census data, and we're grateful to a group of University of Maryland students who gathered this data and conducted the research for us. In this chart, you can see 3 areas of Greenbelt. The blue bar represents the African American population. The green bar represents the white population. And you can see that Greenbelt Center is predominantly white, while Greenbelt East and Greenbelt West are predominantly Black. The numbers in the circles give us the percentage of people in that region of Greenbelt. For example, Greenbelt West holds 39% of our residents. Greenbelt East holds 34% of our residents, while Center Greenbelt has only 27% of our residents. And this has important implications because we need to evaluate how services are dispersed across the different regions of Greenbelt. So now we're going to look at educational performance by school. And to the left, we have 3 elementary schools, followed by 2 middle schools, and then to the right is Eleanor Roosevelt High School. The green bar represents students who are considered white. The orange bar represents students who are considered African American. And the length of the bar tells us the percentage of students who are proficient in math. And you can see that more than 50% of the white students perform well or are proficient in Greenbelt East, Greenbelt Elementary, Dora Kennedy, and Eleanor Roosevelt High School. In contrast, less than 10% of the African American students are proficient in math in Spring Hill Lake Elementary and Magnolia. And that goes up to 20% at the middle school level and then close to 50% at the high school level. So there's a pretty good correlation between wealth and academic achievement. So you can see how some of this data is coming together. So you might also notice that Greenbelt Elementary is in the Greenbelt Center, Spring Hill Lake Elementary is in Greenbelt West, and Magnolia is in Greenbelt East. So there may be opportunities for us to provide more support services in different parts of Greenbelt to support the students and their families who really need the support the most. So I've given you kind of like what we learned, a synopsis, and there are sort of 3 questions I want to leave you with before Lois takes over and talks about some of the remedies. First, how do we as a community understand and respond to the ways past injustices continue to impact the well-being of residents today? How do we acknowledge past harms? And what must change for us to build a more equitable future for the harmed communities? So I'm going to mute and turn it over to Lois. Lois, you're on mute.
I got it. What should we do? Due to historic inequities designed into the development of our utopian community, the city can acknowledge that the wealth gap between African American residents and white residents is significant, acknowledge that the wealth gap is driven primarily by housing and education, redesign systems that favor white residents in the city center to create greater equity for all African Americans who have been historically denied access to housing and education. Next slide. Remedies, potential remedies specific to the African American community. Honor and memorialize African Americans who were enslaved on this land. Honor and memorialize the African American workers who helped build Greenbelt. An apology from the city for maintaining segregated housing, particularly after 1953, when the city was not being held by the federal government. Most of you may not be aware. I would highly recommend you read Richard Rothstein's book, The Color of Law, and you will see how our federal government deliberately designed segregated housing. If anyone who received federal money had to build it based on segregation policies from the federal government. The Color of Law, Richard Rothstein. An acknowledgement of the disparate impact this has had on these populations, education about Greenbelt's complete history for the community, provide support to increase home ownership for the African American community. There are state and county programs that can be used for this purpose. And I think some of the recommendations we will make have to do with those programs. Provide services across all regions of Greenbelt equally. Provide support to improve educational outcomes for all students. I think there was a real need. There used to be individuals who volunteered to help the students particularly in Spring Hill Lake Elementary School with reading and math. We need more folks that are willing to do that. They're going to have a new school soon, so it should be fun to be in that school at that time. Our vision for the future. Next slide. We hope to see a society that accepts its history and imperfections, fosters open dialogue, and supports change to create equitable policies and practices. Repair mechanisms must be instituted for our city and our nation to heal from wounds of the past. These wounds continue to fester and cause disparities within our society. And for example, I have heard residents who live in Greenbelt, for example, say things like, well, whenever Black people come, there's crime. Black people bring crime. Black people don't bring crime. Poverty brings crime. And if you will go to any quote unquote white state, you will hear and see the same challenges. People in Appalachia have the same challenges. Crime is brought by poverty. A society that embraces restorative justice, which includes acknowledgement, restitution, rehabilitation, non-repetition, and compensation. Next slide, please. We are grateful for the feedback from the harm communities and from Greenbelt residents, the city administration, and even members of the city council, as you all participated in 3 town halls that we were able to organize. We have tried to provide speakers at different forums and webinars. Denise and I spoke at the American University in Washington. We have met with community organizations such as Gila and Coming to the Table. We've given out flyers and asked people to look at our website to give us feedback. We've organized listening sessions, focus groups, and interviews with the harm communities. We've read the evaluation of the city's readiness to embrace change that Tribacy conducted and caused a great deal of controversy. We've written articles in the Greenbelt News Review, and members of the commission have testified before Prince George's County Lynching Memorial Project and the Maryland General Assembly in support of the reparations bill that the governor vetoed, but that was overturned by members of the state government. And we have collaborated with the Lakeland community in College Park. As many of you may not be aware that Lakeland has just submitted their own reparations report, restorative justice report, for the 152 homes that were totally decimated once the Lakeland town became part of College Park. They did not want to join College Park because they feared, that's exactly what they feared, that they would be displaced, and they were. So I want to thank you all for letting us make this presentation. And the next slide has all the listing of the members of the commission, and some who are no longer with us, but definitely contributed to the beginning of our process. And we are ready to take your questions. Megan?
Thank you so much to Dr. Rosado and to Denise for your presentation. That was a really very comprehensive discussion of what the Reparations Commission has been doing. Full disclosure, I am the city staff person who has been the staff liaison to the commission. So I have seen firsthand how hard these people have worked, all as volunteers, to create these recommendations that are being sort of discussed right now at the level of the commission. Does anyone have any questions for our speakers? I didn't see any in the chat, but I might have missed them.
Judy Davis has her hand up. Go on, Judy.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank you for this presentation. Even though I have listened to various work sessions and I've talked with Reparation Commission people and read your materials, this still added more information that I needed to hear. So I appreciate that, especially since I wasn't able to go to the latest town hall. The video that was for that dealt with reparations for African Americans that you showed was excellent, and probably should be on the Greenbelt City website just so people can see it, or at least on the museum website. But is there a comparable video for the same situation with the indigenous tribes that we have? Someone that could do that, because they have it's similar in some respects, but there's worse harms in some way, and different harms, unique harms, that people probably are not aware of because it's not taught in our history. I think people have a kind of an idea of what's happened to African Americans, what the Japanese and so on, but what's happened to the indigenous tribes right from the very beginning when the colonists arrived. If anyone has watched the series on the Revolution and on, I've just been watching one on the French and Indian War, lots of tidbits are in there, but you don't have anything that's definite. So do you know of any kind of video that is available?
I don't know of anyone, but you've given me an idea, and I will ask Dr. Taifa of the group that actually worked with her to put that together and see what we can maybe work with some of the indigenous groups we've interviewed to see if they're willing to participate in something like that. So thank you, Judy.
And where is the sacred place? Or is that you want to keep
Indian
secret?
Springs. It's Indian Springs.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. There's in the chat, there are quite a few videos. Farinas, is that you? You want to speak up?
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Unfortunately, there were a lot of distractions at home and I couldn't hear some of the end, but I just wanted to add that there are a number of videos that I think have been made and documentaries, but I have not seen one about our local area per se. But I think we can request, like Dr. Rosado was saying, I'm pretty sure that there is material that can also like be given to someone to make a film as something like a short film, as something that could be an approach to consider to propose to people who want to work in that area for your commission.
Because that video was only 6 minutes and it was so full of information. If we can do something like that for the indigenous community, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and just from what I've observed from being on the interviews with some of the representatives from the various Native American groups that you've talked to, resources are a huge issue. So even though that film was only 6 minutes long, there are so many costs involved with putting together a film like that. The 10-minute intro film that the museum did in 2010, that cost almost $30,000. So it becomes a question of resources, and are there grant opportunities and places to gather. I mean, it's everything like that. But those are great suggestions, and I think we'll definitely, I know at the museum we can definitely note those and see if there are any opportunities for creating something like that.
Thank you.
And I had a question, and you probably answered it in the presentation, and I just missed it, so apologies, you can disregard. But is there a message or a call to action for Greenbelt residents?
We expect there will be a call to action for Greenbelt residents because we have to organize a post-commission group of individuals that are going to make sure that the recommendations that are made are followed through by the city council. So yes, we will be getting to that, Ms. Barinaz.
Thank you. I also see Miss Jennifer Dudley on the line. I don't know if she wanted to say anything.
Oh, no, not particularly. I found the parts of the presentation that I've seen to be so thorough, and I'm really thankful to everyone that did this work. And this work this particular part will be available via recording, right? Where can I find that?
Yes, it'll be on our, the museum has a YouTube channel and it will be posted there probably sometime tomorrow.
Jennifer, you work a lot with the Piscataway Indian Nation. I think that was what Farinaz was trying to get at. Is there anything you want to share?
I think that there would be a lot of openness to working with people to tell their story and their from things from their perspective. So I'm thankful to Jay Davis for bringing that up, and I think that there's a lot of willingness to have that conversation. So I encourage anyone that has the ability to continue to have that conversation to do so, and I'm happy to facilitate wherever I can.
Thank you.
Does anyone have other questions for our speakers? There's a lot of information on the website that is greenbeltreparations.info that has quite a bit of documentation about what the commission has been working on over the past several years. No other questions?
Shall we talk a little bit about our timeline?
Sure.
Oh, was that me then? So we're in the process of finalizing these recommendations. We have the town hall to get some feedback from the community. We're writing up our report. We've just started the writing of the report, and we've gotten some help from an editor. So we're going to be doing some analysis and completing the first draft of the report probably by the end of August, early September. We're hoping that we can wrap this up and have a report delivered to the city council sometime this fall, preferably on the early side, but we don't want to overcommit to having it too soon because there are things that come up. We want to make sure that the information in the report is accurate and sends the message that we want to send to the community, to the public, and to the council. So we may be having another town hall.
Any other questions or comments? I see some thumbs up. Thanks for those. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your support of the Greenbelt Museum and of the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. Please stay tuned for more ways you may be able to get involved. If you want more information about the museum, please visit our website at greenbeltmuseum.org. And stay tuned, watch the news review and other outlets that the city's public information office puts out information about things that the Reparations Commission is doing as well. So we encourage you to look in those places. So thank you so much. I think we give a virtual round of applause to our speakers. And thank you everyone for being here. This will be posted on our YouTube channel. Hopefully, we've got so many good graphics popping up on the screen. This will be posted to the museum's YouTube channel, and we may be able to embed it also onto the Greenbelt Reparations .info site. I think we can do that. So you can check either place. And I will send out a link to it via Eventbrite where you all registered for this talk. So we have another lecture coming up in October to be decided, but we will get word out about that. And in the meantime, come see us at the Greenbelt Museum, Sundays 1 to 5. We're free all summer. So come on by and see us there. Thanks again so much to both of our speakers, and we hope to see you all again very soon.
Thanks
So
again.
much.
Thank you all for joining us.
Have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.